Even people who were going to church listened to the radio on the way to church, listened to the radio all day during the week. Radio was extremely important, and it was a source of significant and essential information that otherwise we would not have had. I did a documentary film called Saying It Loud, radio giving voice to Black America. That is precisely what radio did. You heard people on Black radio first. You heard Black voices on Black radio. Those voices were articulate. They had a radio voice. They used to say, they would sound like, "Hi, this is Bob Law." Everybody spoke with their radio voice. Sound like we were all speaking through an FM microphone. See, this is the radio voice. And Black people listening to that, early on, when you talk about Jocko and those early radio personalities, that was at a time when Black people were being denigrated in this society to the extent that Black people also felt embarrassed. You know how you used to hear something on the news, you hear that there was robbery or somebody got shot, and the first thing you would say is, "Boy, I hope it wasn't a Negro." Right? We were always aware of being under scrutiny and always aware of being projecting the wrong kind of image. So when you heard Black voices on the radio that were articulate and they even sounded hip, that made Black people proud. People were appreciated the fact that there were Black voices, and that the music that used to be played on the Chitlin circuit now was being played on the radio. Now Black radio was taking the music off the back roads and putting it out in the universe. And when the disc jockey played the record, the disc jockey would talk about the music like he really loved the music, like the music was really credible, and suddenly your music was no longer an embarrassment. Now your music was as credible as anybody else's music. And so radio had an important role in helping to give status, credibility to the rhythms of life in the Black community. Radio was very important. Some of those guys that you talked about, y'all remember Jocko? So who would raise your hand if you remember Jocko? That's right. That's right. And Jocko would say that at quarter after the hour all the time, so that he could say, "Diddy Yaakov, this is a Jocko, I'm back on the scene with the record machine. The correct time now is 2:15. It would always be 15. The correct time now is 3:15. So, but there was Jocko, and those guys were suave. They were handsome. And Frankie Crocker said that he wanted to be a disc jockey because when he was growing up in Buffalo, he saw Eddie O.J. Eddie O.J. worked in Cleveland, and Eddie O.J. had won an award in Cleveland, I guess as the disc jockey of the year, and the award was a Corvette. So Eddie O.J. drove the Corvette to Buffalo, and Frankie saw Eddie O.J. in the Corvette, and Frankie said he had never seen a car that only seats 2 people before. So he said, "What does that guy do?" And they said, "He's a disc jockey." Frankie said, "Right, that's what I'm gonna be. I want to be a disc jockey." Frankie said, "The disc jockeys had the best cars and the prettiest women, finest cars and the finest women. I want to be a disc jockey." But the disc jockeys were really radio personalities, and people in the community had a great deal of respect for the jock. And the disc jockey at that time understood their role in the community, and so whenever you saw them, they dressed and walked and carried themselves in a way that you would be proud of them wherever they were. But just a little quick history. But here's where we are. Black radio used to be an important institution. Black radio is in serious, serious decline. And you need to understand why. See, Black radio stations like the Sutton family lost inner city broadcasting, not just WBLS, but they lost inner city broadcasting. The reason they lost inner city broadcasting is that they couldn't pay their bills. The reason they couldn't pay their bills, they went into, the station was foreclosed, and the foreclosure, the company that foreclosed on them took the station from them. Now they had worked out a deal with Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs owned the station in that they were the people who had put up the money the second or third or fourth time around. Goldman Sachs wanted to get money through the program that Bush had created to bail corporations out. I forgot what the program was called. And it wasn't going through Congress. And so Rangel and Maxine Waters approached Goldman Sachs and said that we will, at the congressional level, push that bill through so that these corporations will get their money if you will pull back on your foreclosure of inner city broadcasting. So Goldman Sachs said yes to that. Rangel and Waters did their part. The bill went through. Goldman Sachs and other corporations got their money. Then Goldman Sachs sold it to Eucampia. Eucampia said that deal was with Goldman Sachs, not with us. So we're going to foreclose on you anyway. And then, so in a real sense, Goldman Sachs and Eucampia double-crossed inner city. And so they took the company from them. But the reason that inner city and black radio stations around the country are in trouble is because they can't pay their bills. They can't pay their bills because they don't get paid. I want you to hear this. Black radio stations do not get paid what they deserve based on how well they actually perform. What happens is that the ratings company, Arbitron says to the ad industry that you are not listening to black radio. So when the black radio station goes to the ad industry for advertising dollars, the ad industry does what it calls a minority discount. See, the ad industry says first that this brother right here is not worth the same amount of money as his white counterpart. His white counterpart, same age, same income, but the white counterpart is of more value. So if a white station goes in and says, I've got one white listener, the ad agency considers that 5. So if you go in and say, I've got 3 listeners, the ad agency says, we count that as 15. If the black station goes in and says, I've got 3 listeners, that's counted as 3. It's called a minority discount. They say that the black listener is worth less than the white listener. A memo came out from a media buying company called Katz Media where they said, they were telling their representatives, don't spend money on black media. Black listeners are more like suspects than they are like prospects, right? So the ad agencies pay black radio stations less money. The black radio station says, my rate is $150 for 60-second spot. The ad agency says, I'll give you $75, take it or leave it. $75 is enough to break even. $75 in some cases is not even enough to break even. So the black radio station doesn't get paid, even though it is delivering the audience. The Attorney General of the state of California and the Attorney General of the state of New York, when Cuomo was Attorney General, both of them filed a lawsuit against Arbitron, the ratings company. The language of the lawsuit said that Arbitron is knowingly and willingly giving out false information that is causing the financial decline of black radio. Let me turn this on. That was somebody I've been trying to reach for months. They finally called back. The Attorney General of both New York State and the state of California filed a lawsuit and won. They were able to document in court with what many of us in radio have been saying all the time, that the ratings company was deliberately giving out false information in order to allow the ad industry, the advertising agencies, to justify not paying black radio what they were entitled to. So the ratings company lies, and they say that you're not listening. And so when you go to the ad industry, The media buyer says your station doesn't have sufficient numbers. You remember when WBLS was number one? In order for WBLS to be number one, almost everybody in New York City had to be listening to WBLS. The way the ratings are taken, the only way the black station is going to get good numbers is if it's undeniable, if everybody, BLS was on in department stores, it was novel, it was brand new, and it became the number one station in the city, but that's because an overwhelming number of people were actually listening. The number one station, you ask whatever happened to WRVR. WRVR became Light FM. Light FM is number one on a regular basis. And it does not require many people listening in order for a white station to be number one. The way the ratings are taken, when they ask what station are you listening to, has anybody here ever in your life been asked by Arbitron what radio station you listen to? No. Nobody, one person. And how did they ask you?
They gave me, I had to fill out this form like every day. I had to keep track as to what it was that I was listening to.
Mm-hmm.
This had to have been 30, 25 years ago.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And it was a brand new dollar bill in it?
I don't remember that.
I think, well, maybe that wasn't Arbitron, but Arbitron, that's how they did it. It was called the diary. And you had to fill out the diary. And they would put a brand new, crisp, brand new.
Because they had to in order to.
Yeah, that was to just encourage, it was to encourage you to participate. So they put a dollar bill. But as we move around the country, if you ask people, and that was 30 years ago.
That was at least 25 years.
At least 25 years ago. And not since then has anybody asked you what radio station you listen to, and they've never asked any of the rest of us what radio station we listen to. The way the ratings are taken, it deliberately excludes black people from the survey. And the Attorney General was able to prove that. And as a result, black radio stations could not require or demand the money that they were entitled to. So they were not making any money, and they could not be competitive. And then the major mega corporations have begun to buy up the radio stations around the country. And what you have is the concentration of ownership of all of the media into the hands of 2 or 3 mega corporations. So Disney, Viacom, MS, Fox, they wind up owning radio, television, newspapers. The concentration of media ownership also means that the concentration of thoughts and ideas is coming and controlled from just those 3 or 4 major sources. What is happening is that black people are being removed from the marketplace of ideas so that we are not able to compete, we're not able to challenge the ideas that are in the street. There's a controversy right now, which I maintain is a bogus controversy, as to whether or not it is appropriate for black people to say Black Lives Matter. Well, we're not even involved in the discussion. As people discuss Black Lives Matter, yes or no, we're not in that discussion. There are a number of people who you no longer hear from. With the absence of black radio, there are people who you no longer hear anymore. When black radio was prevalent here in the tri-state area, you would hear Maulana Karenga, Haki Madhubuti, Sonia Sanchez. You would hear Michelle Alexander. You would hear Michelle Alexander would have been a regular on our shows. You would hear, there were people you heard, Alton Maddox. There's nobody in the country talking to Alton Maddox. No. If it wasn't for black radio, which Alton fails to acknowledge, or if it wasn't for black radio, you never would have heard of Alton Maddox. And there are any number of people who have been removed from the marketplace of ideas as black radio is removed. And one of the things that is happening is there's an attempt to create the illusion that black no longer exists and black is no longer necessary. So if you watch television, if you watch MSNBC and CNN and the news programs, there are black reporters on all of those shows. But they are never allowed to talk about anything that is specific to black people. They talk about foreign policy, the economy, whatever. Because the effort is to make the point that black issues no longer exist, that there's not anything that black people need to be particularly concerned about, so that the black people who come on to discuss everything but black. Unless there's something really going on in the street like in Ferguson, Missouri, and there's not an ongoing conversation about Black Lives Matter. And the Minister Farrakhan is about to gather, I don't know how many people are going to be there for the anniversary of the Million Man March, and there's nobody talking about that. None of those black reporters can say anything about that. They can't even challenge it or offer any opinion at all. There's no talk. That's because the concentration of ownership results in the concentration of ideas and information. And ethnicity does make a difference in terms of ownership. There's a sensitivity. There's an awareness of what's important to your own ethnic group. And it does make a difference who owns the station. But black radio is no longer able to compete, not because it doesn't want to. See, our ideas are so powerful that you could put right-wing talk on all day long. You can have them on from Monday through Friday on the radio like they have, and they can talk all day. You can put me or Gary Bird on Monday through Friday with a full-time air shift, 4 hours, Monday through Friday. Just any one of us. The information, the people, the ideas that we would put into the universe are strong enough to compete with all of those guys. As a result, they want to make sure that we're never in a position to compete with them. So they remove us from the marketplace of ideas. And one of the ways to do it was to take control of the black media. Once they control black media, then they can control who's on the air, how long they're on the air, and can also control what it is that they talk about. So, be clear. Black radio. See, black radio was thriving, at least in terms of ideas, and being an influential force in the community. And it was doing that all over the country. Then a couple of things happened. Jesse Jackson ran for the presidency in 1984. When Jesse ran for the presidency, Jesse introduced his campaign on my show, One Night Talk. And Jesse would be my co-host like every Tuesday night for a couple of months. And he was talking about his candidacy and should he run. It was on black radio that Jesse said, somebody said, "Run, Jesse, run." And people began to say, "Run, Jesse, run," all over the country, even when Jesse wasn't on the air. And Jesse Jesse one time said, "Most people are calling in saying I should run. Everybody wants me to run." He said, "I really wish somebody would call in and say I shouldn't run. Because if they would say I should not run, then I could debate, and I could create some tension, and that would take this campaign even further." And that did happen. But Jesse was a remarkable candidate. I don't remember if you all remember 1984, but Jesse was the best candidate in the race. He was the tallest, he was the best looking, he could rhyme. He said that they're mad at him because they can't rhyme. Jesse said forward ever, backward never. Jesse would talk about the tree shakers and the jelly makers. But he was an excellent candidate, but his visibility came, and the momentum behind him came from black talk radio all over the country. The policymakers in this country saw the kind of reach and influence Jesse had. Jesse was getting as much visibility then as Donald Trump is getting now. And Donald Trump is getting it because of all the money that he's spending. Jesse didn't have any money, but he was getting as much visibility as Donald Trump. He was a major candidate. He would come into any city and it would be like a rock star. And the crowds would be huge coming out to see Jesse. Black talk radio was the wind beneath his wings. Policymakers saw that. Then in 1995, the Million Man March. Black talk radio is primarily responsible for the success of the Million Man March. It was Black Talk Radio that talked about it, that said people should go, that promoted it, that explained it, that made it viable. Now, if you remember in 1995, every black and white political personality, every major black and white political personality in the country said don't go. You remember that? Jesse said don't go. Charlie Rangel said don't go. David Dinkins said don't go. Rudy Giuliani said don't go. Everybody said don't go. Did y'all go?
Yep.
Who did you listen to? The major political personalities or these voices that you heard on the radio? And names of people, you were responding to people whose names the policymakers couldn't even pronounce. You're responding to Haki Madhubuti. You're responding to Molefe Asante. You're responding to Maulana Karenga. We said go. The major players said don't go. We said go. More than 1 million men came. The policymakers saw that. They said that this radio, this black radio, has much too much influence. It was the way the police captain responded to Malcolm. You remember when the Muslims, the FOI, was all out in front of the police precinct? And Malcolm just stepped up in front of the precinct and did like that? And they all turned around and walked off. And the police captain said, that's too much power for one man. Well, they said the same thing about black radio. I came back from the Million Man March and came to speak at a church here in New Jersey, and we were telling people, go back and work with your existing organizations. We want you to go back and work with the organizations that already exist and stop asking, what's the follow-up? We want you to go back and get busy with the groups that are already there. The brother got up and said, listen, we don't want to work with the existing organizations. We went to that march because you said go. We're looking for you now to provide the new leadership. That's why people went, because we said go. And they did that all over the country. The policymakers say, we've got to remove that force. We've got to take that power back. And that's when the assault on black radio really began. So the agency started reporting, under-reporting the listeners, under-reporting everything, causing black radio stations to lose their financing. And the last thing we put that is see, the way it works nowadays is that if you buy you need to own more than one radio station. Because if I own WWRL and I'm trying to sell airtime on RL, my competitor, who might be Disney, goes to the same ad agency and they say to the ad agency, if you spend money on WWRL, you're going to get one station. If you spend money with me, I will put your ad on 3 stations in that same city. Because they have taken over the FCC and changed the FCC rules. The corporations have changed the FCC rules so that there are no longer any limits on how much media you can own in one market. So they say, I now own 3 stations and a newspaper in New York. Spend your money with RL, you get 1 station. Spend it with me, I'll put your ad in the newspaper, and I will put it on 3 stations. I'm going to charge you more than they're charging at RL, but I'm going to give you a great deal more coverage. And then they say, if you want to make a national buy, spend money with me, and I will put your commercial on the 4 or 5 stations I own around the country. So in order to be competitive, the black radio stations the black owners had to have more than 1 station. So they all began to borrow money in order to buy radio stations in other cities so that they could stay in business, so that when they went to an ad agency, they could say the same thing. Spend money with me at WWRL, and now the brother who owned WWRL now owns about 4 or 5 other radio stations, and he says, I'll put your commercial on my station in Shreveport, Louisiana. I'll put it on my station in Washington, my station here, station there, mostly throughout the South. They did that in order to be competitive. And still, the ad agencies would not spend the money with them. And so now they bought all these other radio stations. The ad agencies are still not spending money with them. Now they can't pay the rent on the radio stations that they bought. So now they're all facing foreclosure because they could not get paid what they deserved based on how well they actually perform. Black radio is the most efficient media buy in the industry. If you want to talk to black people, you could spend some money on WINS, the all news station. They point out that they have black listeners. You don't know exactly how many are listening at any given time. You don't know exactly what hour to spend your money. You don't know where to place your money because you don't know for real when the black audience or what the numbers of black people are at any given quarter hour. But if you spend your money on black radio, whatever day part you select, you know that black people in significant numbers are listening to that radio station. If you spend money on WBLS, you know that there are black people listening. And they can break it down for you in terms of ages and time of day. And so it becomes a very efficient buy. You know exactly where your money is going and who your money is reaching, right? Black radio does not get paid, even though it is an efficient and effective media buy. Now here's the issue. The future of black radio is really very, very dim. And black radio is disappearing everywhere. The only way that black radio is going to survive and regain its place of prominence. Now, a white company, MS, owns BLS and LIV. Another company owns WWRF. It's now a Spanish language station. It doesn't talk to black people at all. It's happening to black radio stations all over the country. People that used to own those black radio stations that were such an important part of the black community are no longer owned by black people. The concentration of ownership is part of the problem. Now here's what. The only way that black radio and black media, Ebony Magazine is no longer owned by Johnson Publications, it's white owned. Every BET is white owned. Everything is white owned. And in order to survive, people like the OWN network, that's Oprah's network, they've got to make deals with major corporations to keep the funding to even stay alive. Here's what. The future of black media, the future of the black community is in your hands. The future of black media is in your hands. That's why when Minister Farrakhan says justice or else, see, the or else is critical. Or else is what's important. Or else doesn't mean going in the street and attack people. What it means, see, Martin Luther King is the person who came up with that first the night before he was murdered in Memphis. Dr. King said, now the other thing we have to do is to attach economic withdrawal to our direct action initiatives. He went on to say that currently only the garbage men in Memphis are suffering the pain. We have to have a way to redistribute the pain. So what I want you to do is when you go from here tonight, he said, I want you to spread the word, stop buying Seal Test, stop buying Wonder Bread, stop buying Maxwell House Coffee. He wasn't just coming up with names off the top of his head. He was naming the products that black people buy at a disproportionate level. We spend more money on those products than any other ethnic group in the country. So he was saying we have to engage in economic withdrawal. What we're saying to the policymakers is that you have got to support our struggle for equal justice in this country, or else we will stop buying your products. You have to say to politicians, somebody asked me on a radio show this morning, what has to happen and change in the legislation? The reason that the legislation is what it is and it doesn't give you any legal standing is because the lawmakers, that's people in Congress, are not doing anything to strengthen the laws that give the community legal standing. And so you have to go to the Congressional Black Caucus. You have to say to the caucus, you've got to challenge the FCC, you've got to rewrite the law, you've got to put some guidelines back in, or else we will vote you out of office. If you don't have an or else, they will continue to dismiss us. So whenever you look at a political strategy, you have to add to that strategy an or else. You come up with the or else. But you've got to have a way to redistribute the pain. You've got to have an or else strategy. So that when you look at black radio and the ratings company is lying, and we take them to court, and nothing changes, here's the only way it's going to change. You look at the products that you buy. You have to be willing to say to McDonald's, for instance, that you don't really care what the ratings company tells you. You have to say to McDonald's, if you don't spend money on black radio, we will stop buying your product. Spend money on black media, or else we'll stop buying your product. You have to say that to Nike. You've got to say that to all of these corporations that you underwrite. According to McDonald's website, McDonald's makes about $20,000 to $25,000 a day per store in the black community. Black people, the research says that black people eat more fast food than any other ethnic group in the country. There are 6 times as many fast food restaurants in black communities as there are in any other community. In fact, black communities are considered a food desert, that you don't even have a sufficient variety of places to buy food or restaurants to eat. If you want to eat out, you have to drive out of your neighborhood. If you want to shop, you've got to drive out of your neighborhood in order to go to a supermarket that will give you a reasonable amount of items to choose from. Black communities are considered a food desert, but you are spending disproportionately on fast food, and the fast food is killing you. There's an article in the Washington Post that says fast food industry shamelessly targets black youth because they target black youth for the consumption of fast food. Their advertising and their marketing is directed very much to this young sister and younger. And that food is toxic, high in sodium. It clogs the arteries, it's causing diabetes, it's raising your cholesterol level, it is doing real harm. And the article was saying it's interesting that they would target black youth for this toxic food when black youth are suffering from diabetes and obesity more so than other groups. You have to say to McDonald's, you've got to redirect your money on our terms. You have to put your money back in the community the way we tell you to put it back in the community, or else we won't buy your product. You have to say that to the cola companies. You've got to say that to Nike brags about the fact that young black men are the driving force behind their success. Because young black men not only buy sneakers, but young black men are global trendsetters. If young black men buy it, then young white men buy it, young Latino men buy it, young Asian men buy it. They buy whatever young black men buy. They dress the way young black men dress. I even heard some young Latino men calling each other nigger. They say whatever young black kids say. And so Nike acknowledges that young black men are global trendsetters and are driving their success. But Nike doesn't put any money back in your community on your terms. They don't put any money in media. The only way that we're going to be able to redirect the money back into our own institutions is if we do it as a demand. And you have to be willing to say to those corporations that we don't really care what the ratings company tells you. We say that the ratings company is lying. We've been saying that since the 1970s. And we know that you know they're lying. But you're using their bogus information to deny us the resources that we're entitled to. And so you're going to treat us fairly, or else we'll stop buying your product. And see, the corporations, see, the problem is this. The corporations are not scared of y'all. The corporations say that Negroes will never stop buying burgers. You can preach this all you want. You can point out that the food is bad. And y'all know that the truth is bad. It's been all over the internet for years. You've seen the little thing where they have a burger that they have that has been on YouTube, and the burger has been sitting out open for how many years? For a couple of years, and the burger doesn't shrivel, the burger doesn't spoil, because it's all chemicals. You know good and well that food is not real. You know that if it was real, they couldn't sell it for $1.99. They're just selling chicken, and your chicken McNuggets, and they cost $1. You know, if it was real chicken, they couldn't sell it for $1. You all know that. You know that stuff is not real. And you know that stuff is full of chemicals, toxins, poison, and you're buying it anyway. And people, before we started doing it in a political context, the people, the nutritionists have been just granted for years trying to get folk to stop buying fast food. There was some cities who actually passed a temporary ordinance that said you cannot build another fast food restaurant in the black community for the next 5 years. They said no matter what we tell them about how harmful the food is, black people will continue to buy it. The only way that we can protect their health is if we limit the number of stores that can open in their community, because on their own, they don't have the discipline to stop doing something that is destroying their health and destroying their children. Lord help them. And so, black radio, black media, black radio doesn't have a future at this point. But it doesn't mean that it has to be over. Because see, there was a time when Harlem didn't have a future. There was drugs on 8th Avenue. Harlem didn't have a future. We couldn't get black people to buy brownstones in Harlem, and people who did live in Harlem were moving out because it really didn't have a future. And then the policymakers changed the policy. No more drugs on 8th Avenue. Now there's brownstones. Now there's condos. Now there's restaurants all up and down Malcolm X Boulevard. And soon they're going to change the name so that it's no longer Malcolm X Boulevard. They're going to change the name so that it's no longer Adam Clayton Powell Boulevard. This is a prophecy. They haven't announced it, but you watch. Because there's some places they've already begun to do that. There's a store, a restaurant on the corner of about 126th Street, and it's on Malcolm X Boulevard. And it used to be called, it was called the Boulevard Restaurant or Malcolm X Boulevard, but they changed the name. They won't, the new owners won't call it Malcolm X. They won't relate what they're doing to Harlem. They've come up with a whole, I think it's called the Corner Social. Say anything other than Malcolm X Boulevard. You know, they're going to move to eliminate everything that is black. The effort is to marginalize all things black. That's why they have the audacity to say that we should not say Black Lives Matter. See, listen to this, and then I'm finished. If I say Black Lives Matter, and a black person says all lives matter, see, the black person who says all lives matter is someone who is suffering from a chronic level of low self-esteem. That you don't even think that you are entitled to exalt your own life. You don't even think that you are entitled to make the point that your life is precious, unless you first apologize for thinking that your life is precious by pointing out that you know all other lives also matter. You don't think you're entitled to claim that kind of priority for your own life and the lives of your children, your family. You think that you have to say all lives matter in order to say your life matters. The reason that we have to say Black Lives Matter is because all lives are not in the line of fire. It is black lives that are being taken. It is the value of black lives that are in serious decline. It's young black men who get killed every 28 hours by a cop in this country. Not young white men or Asian men or Latino men. It's black lives that are in the line of fire. It is black lives that is young black kids who are being stopped and frisked. I had a conversation with my grandson, who's 21 years old. I had a conversation about him being careful. and not being so careless as you walk up and down the street and deal with policemen. You know, I can tell them, you act like you don't live in America. You know, it's like, these Bill's a little bougie, little middle class kid. And so you walk around like you don't live in America. You know, and so you have to tell, and you know how parents have to tell their sons, when you go out, you have to tell your 19, 18, 20-year-old son what to do if a cop stops them. Is that right? White parents don't have to do that, and you know it. White parents don't have to have that conversation with their children. They don't have to say, keep your hands down, look him in the eye, read his card, his label, pen, and get his name, and say yes, sir. And they don't have to give their children instructions on how to deal if they're stopped by a policeman. They just tell their kid, if a cop stops you, call me. And because black lives, white lives are not in the line of fire. It is not white lives that are in danger. It is your life and the lives of your children. And we have a need to make it clear. See, within the human family, all lives matter. But in that same human family, there's one group in the human family whose lives have been diminished. One group, us, for whom the value of our lives has been diminished. The value of our lives is in decline. And so within that human family, that group has a need to say, look here, human family, my life matters because you are treating me as though it does not matter. And it's not just a question of people getting shot, but black people are suffering on every level. Black people are sending their children to dysfunctional schools. White people don't. Black people black people have the highest debt, the lowest income, the highest disease rate. Black women have the lowest survival rate from breast cancer. But black women do not get breast cancer as much so as white women do. But they still have the lowest survival rate because of treatment and resources that are available or not available. It is black lives that are in the line of fire. You all understand that? And it is black lives that have to be, the value of black lives that has to be restated, because listen, Black Lives Matter is not a message just for white people. Black lives don't matter to black people. Black lives don't matter to the Crips. Black lives don't matter to the Bloods. Black lives don't matter to the gangbangers. I was listening to reading the lyrics from a rap song by a guy named Schoolboy, and he's in there romanticizing killing black people. He's talking about, I came in and they were doing something and I had a shotgun and I started shooting and all you see is niggas running, and he's gloating as he talks about the romanticizing killing black people. He's talking about killing black people. Nowhere in the song does he say, I had my shotgun and I go everywhere and shoot. And I see white people running. And black people don't walk around calling white people by names. You know, black people don't walk around calling white people crackers and honkies. They just call each other niggas. See, black lives don't matter to black people. And so there's a need to reestablish the fact that black lives are of great value for everybody. And see, if you understand that black lives matter, then you won't tolerate dysfunctional schools. If you understand that black lives matter, you won't tolerate discrimination on any level. I just got a letter from a government agency that said that I need to fill out a form because I'm supposed to get payback from a class action lawsuit. I might get $140, I think. But what happened is that the agency found that the finance company, I keep forgetting the name of the company, I think it's Alliance, is the automobile finance company, that we bought a car through a reputable, we thought, Chrysler dealer out in Long Island. Went through the regular process. And you know, when you buy a car from the dealer puts the credit whole process through, and then you find out who the finance company is. And this finance company was charging black people more money, higher interest rates than anybody else. And how did the finance company know I was black? I never met anybody from the finance company. The dealer was telling them who the black people were. See, black people are under attack on every level. And if you understand that, and if you say that Black Lives Matter, then you're saying that you won't tolerate any kind of disrespect or disregard. Not just about shooting people, but you won't tolerate the schools, you won't tolerate the lack of health care, and you won't tolerate mediocre politicians who never act in your interest. The reason that the reason that the Congressional Black Caucus continues to exist and the people in the caucus continue to get reelected to office is because you don't think that Black Lives Matter. You know very well that they are not serving your interests. You know that you can't trust them, you can't count on them, you know that they don't deliver, but you send them back every 2 years. If you really understood and believed and internalized the idea that Black Lives Matter, then you would demand that you would be treated by everyone as though your life was of value. You come up with the or else. But if you continue to go to them without asking for without any leverage that's going to force their hand, then they will continue to deny you. The future of media, we have to be active in the marketplace of ideas. We have to have black media. But you can't allow the people who underwrite all other media to continue to take your money and spend your money promoting and supporting their media while your media declines and disappears. And so the future of black media is in your hands. It is whether or not, or the extent to which you are willing to say or else. The extent to which you are willing to say to the media, spend money with us or else we won't buy your product. We've been trying to push for this economic withdrawal as a political strategy. Mr. Farrakhan has said, don't shop on Black Friday. We've been talking to him over a couple of years trying to get him to say that. Now he's saying it. But we were trying to build a campaign, and we're not saying don't shop on Black Friday just out of spite. These major corporations who receive so much of your money refuse to spend any of your money in support of any of our struggles for justice in this society. And corporations take political positions. There are issues that they support. They just don't support us. But they take our money. And we've got to be able to have some leverage to get them to put money back on our terms. Y'all with that? And so we would say, don't shop on Black Friday. If y'all would not shop on Black Friday, the malls and that the corporations, they will be on the phone Saturday trying to find out who organized this. That we must talk to you. What is it that you want us to do? Last story. Reverend Leon Sullivan in Washington, Philadelphia, went to, there was a bakery. I think it was Edmund's Bakery, something like that. Edmund's Bakery. Tasty Cake, whoever it was. I think it was Tasty Cake. And they had a chain of bakeries throughout the Philadelphia area. And they would not hire black people. And so Reverend Sullivan called the president of the company and said who he was and he'd like to meet with him. And so the president's secretary told the president that there's a Reverend Sullivan on the phone who wants to talk to you. He says he has a coalition of black preachers and they'd like to talk to you about hiring policy. The man said, I don't have any time to talk to the Negro preachers. This is back in the 60s. I don't have any time to talk to them. I'm busy. I'm telling him no, put him off. I'm not talking to him. So the woman told him, he's very busy, he doesn't know when he can fit you in his schedule. Reverend Sullivan said, okay, fine. That was like, whatever day. But at the end of that week, so that was Wednesday. On Sunday, see, when he said he had a coalition of preachers, he didn't tell the man he had a coalition of 100 preachers. From over 100 pulpits, the word went out on the same Sunday, don't buy Tasty Cake. Wednesday, the president of Tasty Cake was on the phone. Reverend Sullivan, Dr. Reverend Sullivan, sir. When will you be in your office? May I please come and meet with you? Dr. Sullivan was about to put him out of business. You have that kind of leverage. You just have to use what's in your hand. And Adam Powell said, what's in your hand, black man? He said, well, Reverend, you know how people pray. They say, Lord, deliver us. And Lord, help us. And Lord, soften the heart of this wicked banker who won't give us a fair interest rate. Lord, change his heart. Lord, help us. I could just hear God say, well wait, what's in your hand? Oh, $1 trillion, Lord. Why don't you use what I've already put in your hand? But are you opposed to having your own bank? Are you opposed to building your own community? Why don't you use what's in your hand? If you use what's in your hand, we will win overnight. Thank you.
All right. I'm going to give Brother Law another round of applause.